Hello, my name is Reagan Lowry, and today I'll be introducing you the book Naked in the Woods, My Unexpected Years in a Hippie Commune by Margaret Grundstein. And I'll be answering the question, what challenges did communes face in their quest to create a better kind of society? The book starts in 1968, and some events that were going on at the time were, the Vietnam War. John F. Kennedy had been assassinated along with Martin Luther King Jr. And at the time, a lot of self-proclaimed hippies started to come up everywhere. And because they felt like there was a time, it was a time of, there was a lack of peace. There was a bunch of violence, and they felt lost in the sense of the government and the wars that were going on. And so they went out into the woods, but they went out into back countries and started creating these communes in hopes of creating more peace, a part of this counterculture to just not exist on the same level as everyone else and just go and live peacefully with just all this love and no hate, and that abandon society's views and standards and just go out and be naked in the woods and do whatever you want and get high and just live life without any without having to the issues of normal everyday life, paying taxes and going to your 9 to 5 and handling everyday responsibilities. You could just go live out and do whatever you wanted, and that's what they believed in. Some background information on the author, Margaret Grundstein, is that when she used to be at Yale University, and she was part of a group called the Radicals that stood for love and peace and equality. She was also a very proud hippie and wore it on her sleeve and was proud of that, and was something that she regularly had brought up. And she thought of it as a force for good, as she believed in the fact that she was fighting against this evil in a peaceful manner. And in 1970, she moved with her husband, and they went to the backwoods of Oregon to live in a hippie commune, which is where the book starts. The first of their many issues was finances and self-sufficiency. Some ways that they ran into some trouble was figuring out how to do food, because you gotta spend money to get food, right? I mean, you can farm, you can make a garden, but all of them were city kids. They never grew up farming at all. It's talked about that in one of the first chapters, is that, they had never planted before. They never made a garden. And they had a tractor, but they had to figure out how to use it to till up the ground, and it was really old, left by the landlord, and none of them knew how to work it, so they just had to kind of just figure it out and figure out how to plant, how to just make the garden work, because this had to work for them. It became more of a survival thing. She talked about how they planted tomatoes and cucumbers and eggplants and lettuce and all these vegetables, and then they realized that they can't just live off of that. They need more protein. I mean, they can't be eating eggplants every single day. They need more protein. And so they ran into a chicken dilemma. They were able to get chickens, but the chicken dilemma was the fact of their morals, a philosophy dilemma, and they came into this fact. Margaret talked about how she just felt terrible, and that they felt terrible about taking the eggs of the chickens and keeping them contained and confined and not having them free range and having them kind of contained in an area, that this life, that this living being, animal, and taking the chicken and having to not only, steal its eggs and then eat them and cook them and eat them, but also then taking the chicken and putting it down so that they could eat it, or so they could cook it and eat it and survive. And they ended up making I believe her husband doing that. And that was just it was a very hard aspect for them. And it interfered with their views, and it created this, am I doing the right thing? Is this worth it? Kind of look on what they were doing, but they believed in the long run that it would be just fine, and that they'd eventually get over it and things would go on great. And the only way that they really had means of making money was unemployment checks and leftover money that they had from before they moved into the middle of nowhere out in Oregon. And luckily, her husband had a little bit of money. He came from money, and so he had at least some in the beginning, and there were some other people in the group that had money that they were able to help pitch in. But besides that, it really became a hard thing. I mean, they ate government cheese, which does not sound appealing at all. if you ask me about it, it makes me think of cheese in the can. Sorry, that's off topic. Anyway, but finances became a real issue and a real challenge and it affected, how they ate and how they survived. The second issue or challenge that they ran into was a struggle with power and authority. One of the main reasons that they all went out into the woods and decided to be a part of a hippie commune was to leave authority and power behind, and so that there'd be no head, there'd be no leader, and it would just be all of them living with each other and all helping and supporting and coexisting without any sort of I'm the person that makes the rules and I'm the person that enforces the rules, because they'd all kind of live in a fact of where they all had a say and they all worked together, with no one being someone who gets to make the final decision or anything like that. But they kept running into that issue of, especially with the guys, of wanting to take authority or show that they are a leader, they can be a leader. One specific part would be in chapter 11. They talk about money, and money being a big issue, which is talked about in finances, but it was also, they were specifically in that chapter, they talked about it in a sense of power. And Margaret's husband put all of his money out on the table, his employment check, and he was like, this is for everyone. And he was doing that in the sense of power and being like, all the money that I have, I'm giving it to show that, and he did that to show that this is gonna be my money, and I'm giving you all my money. So now it's our money. And it was done in a way not to be like, we can all use this money and look how much this helps. It was put out in a way of I have this money and I'm providing you. This is mine and I'm giving it to you, but it is with the intent of being I have the power to give this money, and not in a sense of, here's more money for us. It's this is my money, but I'm giving it to you. I have the power to give it to you. And one of the other guys in the group, I believe it was Clint, talked about, he was like, fine, I'll give some money, but this is all I'm giving. And it was put off in a sense of fine. It's it was he was folding and being fine, I'll also pitch in. And there was a power struggle between a lot of the guys. they wanted to prove that they could be a leader and that they had the capability to be a leader. The guys also only took up roles that were, they ended up taking up all the roles that tended to be more masculine presenting jobs, more of the hard labor jobs that involved more heavy lifting, or in a more traditionally male type job, while the women ended up doing most of the more feminine presenting jobs, the more traditional female jobs, like taking care of the kids, doing the cooking and the cleaning, and picking the fruits and the vegetables and washing them and doing the laundry, while the men did everything else. And it was less of like, it was less intermixed. There was another part where one of them was talking about getting a lathe, and everyone was excited, but it was only really the guys got to use it, and it was said it was going to be for everyone, but everyone was really just the guys, because they were only allowed to do that, which is something that was interesting, because it was like anyone was supposed to be able to do everything and just kind of relax and live on their own, but then there was still kind of rules in the sense of like, the guys get to use a lathe, not really the women. There was a part where one of the women was using a tractor, and they were all surprised, like, she's using the tractor? Like, that was just a very big deal, which I feel like shouldn't have been a big deal if they were trying to coexist all together, but that would be kind of, yeah, they definitely had that power struggle, in the sense of they didn't want power, but it kept coming back to where there was someone trying to lead and show that they had power, in a sense. The third issue or challenge they faced was contradicting values. And this was in a more broad sense. There were multiple issues that they had that were conflicting with each other when they came into the commune. One of them being the value of relationships. Many of the men came in wanting to be able to kind of sleep around and have sex with whoever, and not have very many ties to them. So not really, they wanted open relationships. A not quite monogamous but not quite polyamorous relationship. They wanted one where they could see each other people and kind of just freely have sex with whoever they wanted, while still being tied to one person, or not having ties to any and just kind of sleeping around and having these sexually tied relationships, and not necessarily emotionally tied relationships. And many of the women came in not with that in mind. That was, it was, they had believed in the most part of the fact that they were coming to separate themselves from the societal norms and government, and kind of escape the realities of adulthood and society. And the men did not necessarily all see it that way. And it wasn't everyone in that case, but it was a lot of them. And so there was a lot of issues when it came to that. Even with Margaret, her and her husband had those issues. And it caused quite a bit of tension. And a lot of the women just kind of ended up putting up with it, being like, all right, whatever. They didn't like it, but they ended up putting up with it because they didn't want to leave the commune. Another big issue was what to do with the land and the money. And one instance in chapter 14, they talked about how Don and his wife wanted to build this giant concrete dome thing on the land, and they were like, oh, don't worry about it, we can demolish it one day. But then they realized that that's gonna be a lot, and so they had, and then the rest of the group was like, no, we can't do this, it'll be terrible for the land, and we don't want to build something that permanent just for you to destroy it on the land. And so they were bickering on about it and said, if you want to do that, you're going to have to leave. And so they left. And they never saw them again, the rest of the commune. And that was one instance that happened. Another was money on what tools to buy, where to move to, what tools or what food that they could buy with it. And they had a lot of different issues. A lot of conflicts did come through the money and through what to do with the land, which caused tensions, especially with the guys. A lot of the men had a lot of tension between each other, and a lot of the women kind of stuck with what their partners were saying. They wouldn't, not a lot of them spoke up for themselves, and so that was another area where they had contradicting values that caused some tension within the commune. And finally, the last issue or challenge that they faced, and one specifically Margaret, faced, was love. And they went out there, starting communes, to embrace love and peace. But love ended up being a huge issue. As I stated in earlier points, love became something that was a difficult and challenging issue. The guys wanted to be able to kind of sleep around, in a sense, and not necessarily be tied solely to one person. And when it came to Margaret, she was married, freshly married. She had this love, she had this husband that she found that she loved him. I mean, they got married. She thought that they had some perfect love, and it ended up not being the case. And her husband left her for another woman so that he could have this freer love. And it hurt. It hurt Margaret. I mean, she thought that she got married, and usually people don't just get married because they like each other. Because they love each other and they want to be with each other till the end of time. And that separation hurt her. And it was kind of contradictory to the reasons that they wanted to be there. It was to embrace love, not to, to break away from it. And she ended up sleeping with another guy, and she got pregnant from basically like a one-night stand, and she had a struggle with love, and there were issues that came with that. And so that was another contradicting part, because as the stereotype and the reason that they went there, as I've stated multiple times throughout this, was they came for love and peace, less violence, to live as a whole in a community, in a safe and welcoming environment. And things just started to turn on each other, and love had a big role in that. And so I would say that was another one of the bigger challenges that they faced. To conclude, I would say that the lesson that I learned, at least from reading the book Naked in the Woods, my Unexpected Years in a Hippie Commune by Margaret Grundstein, would be that not everything that seems perfect, in a sense, is always perfect. Especially in the sense of running away. To her, in the standpoint of, the Vietnam War was going on, there was the women's rights movement, and there was the racial movements that were going on, and it just seemed like a really hard time to be in America. and just to be around. And that option, that to go and escape into the backwoods of Oregon and live out in a commune, where everyone gets to hold hands and sing kumbaya and grow their own vegetables and live off the land. And it may seem perfect, but in a way, it's kind of childish or naive to think that you can just run away in a sense, and that running away will fix all your issues. I should say, because living in the commune wasn't the issue. I think the issue was being so naive about it and thinking that that is going to fix all your problems. And so, in my sense, I would say that I've learned that running away from the problem isn't the issue. It will be the issue. It's not going to make things better. It's, in most cases, just going to hurt. It won't be bad. It won't 100% be bad or fail in a sense. But, I mean, in the end, she had to provide for her kids. She learned that she can't just live out there, and she needs to get a job to survive. And that's kind of how it ends. And so I would say that, you just can't really run away thinking that it will solve all your problems. You have to be, if you want to run away, you have to be prepared for the life that is. And so, yeah, that's how I'd say, that's what I learned from the book. I highly recommend it. It was a great book, very interesting to read. And yeah, thank you for watching.